Welcome into Warchant TV. This is Ira Schoffel, managing editor of Warchant.com, and I'm joined today by a very special guest, a gentleman by the name of Ben Haumiller, who is a Florida State graduate. And usually when we do these videos, Ben, I usually try to introduce the person and maybe say what their background is or their job title, but I'm talking to maybe the person with the coolest job in the world, and so I feel like you should have the honor to maybe let people know who you are and why we're talking to you today and what you do for a living.
Oh, Ira, thanks so much. Happy to be here. Longtime fan of Warchant. So this is kind of a fun time for me to be able to come out here and talk to you and talk about what we're doing here. So yeah, principal game designer here at EA Sports, working on college football. I've been at EA 24 years now. This game was always the reason why I wanted to work in this industry. I got my start in Tallahassee at Florida State when I was there, and graduated and came back and never left, and have been able to live out a dream here for 24 years. Fortunate enough to work on the old game, NCAA game, for about a decade, and then stuck around here knowing that we'd be back at some point, and wanted to be a part of that resurgence to bring us back to glory. And here we are, only a week away from this game. I cannot believe we're here, but we're a week away from this game being back.
That's awesome, man. So, all right, so we'll start from the beginning, and then we'll kind of catch up to where we are now. So the game comes out July 19th. Is that correct?
Full release July 19th. Early release, if you get the deluxe edition, is July 16th. You can get a couple days early that way.
Okay, awesome. So what years were you in school at Florida State? Where did you grow up? And were you a Nole growing up? How'd you get here? And what years were you at Florida State?
Yeah, totally. So, born in Chicago, but raised in Orlando. My parents moved down to Orlando when I was 1, so I really am a lifelong Floridian in that regard, and mainly Orlando resident. Went to school here in Orlando as well at Lake Howell High School. A lot of friends of mine were Florida State fans. I was always a Florida State fan growing up as well. It was kind of a no-brainer choice for me. Yeah, sure, I applied at other places, but I always knew where my heart was and where I was going to go. So 97 was my first year, and graduated in summer of 01. So I was there for the second year of Thad Busby, all through the Winky years. So a great time to be in Tallahassee. Got my degree in sociology, so absolutely nothing to do with what I'm doing now. When I was going to school, you didn't have the opportunity to go to school to learn how to design video games or produce video games. You could be a software engineer or an artist. Those roles there are around, but that stuff really wasn't something that you were able to do. So we used to go around and try to crown the best college player in the nation. They go school to school to school, and so they happened to come to the club down under, and they were going to set up a tournament. And I went and didn't win, but played fairly well. And was talking to one of the guys, and they said, "Yeah, we're based out of Orlando." And kind of that light bulb went off of like, wait a second, okay, let's find out more about this, because I always loved video games and I always loved sports, and I had an opportunity here to marry the two of them. Like, that was just you could tell a 10-year-old Ben that was an opportunity for him, would never believed you. And so here we were, did it for a summer as just a game tester on Madden 2001 on PC. Absolutely loved it. Went back to school, finished up my degree, didn't have a real plan, moved home, and came back to work again. I was like, let's keep doing this for a little while, and figured it out, and just got the bug and just loved it and never left. And so I stayed in QA for a couple of years, kind of learned the business from that, and that was kind of my on-the-job training. Had the opportunity to work on NCAA 05. That was the first one that I worked on from the QA side of things, and then joined the development team for NCAA 06. Back then, you were kind of a designer producer, was basically the same role. So that's what I started out as. Just working on feature development and figuring out what it was we were going to do each year. Kept growing with that. Just my passion for the sport just helped shine through to help me propel me to keep working on this game. And so continued on, became more of a face of the game in a way. I did a lot of the press in the old game. Was doing less of the feature development and more of the producing of things. So that's kind of where I graduated from doing more of the design work to being more of a producer. Was that for a number of years. And then unfortunately the game went on hiatus, and we all know that story. Knew we'd be back at some point, didn't know when. Knew I just needed to stick around to help bring it back when it eventually did. So I went to Madden for a little while, and that was fine, but I'm not an NFL guy. NFL is great. I totally get the appeal, but I'm a college guy through and through. So I was kind of going through that, but it wasn't my thing. But I was getting more interested in other sides of the business. So I was learning about the licensing side of the world. I was learning about the partnership and all those elements, and kind of gravitated towards that. And that's kind of what became my niche for a while. And I moved out of game development and was over in business affairs and kind of learning that side of the house. And it was really interesting and really fascinating. I also knew in the back of my head, when we got back to making college, that was going to be the tip of the spear to help get us back. And so I started working that way. to understand, okay, how can we get schools more comfortable with us again? What's the ways of getting us back in? And now, NIL comes along and that opens up a lot of doors for us. Before that, we started doing a bit of a pilot program in Madden a few years ago, where we added some schools in. You could go through go through the college football playoff and play with some schools, and that was kind of a way to get us introduced back into the college scape, get us back in with schools being comfortable that we could put them into the game without any sort of lawsuit concerns, and respectful of players that maybe didn't opt in to be in, how we could handle a genericized version of them, things like that, kind of proving all of that out. But then as we started getting back into development again and building this game back up, my heart was always back on development. And the old famous Bear Bryant quote, I use this all the time because it's so true for me, was when mama calls, you come running. And so the opportunity to come back and help lead the development side was there, and I had to take it. So came back over to development as principal game designer, and that's the role I run right now on essentially over Dynasty and Road to Glory, the two main areas I focus on, but kind of have a little bit of an eye on everything that we're doing here. But just, being a part of this amazing team. I think that's first and foremost. I'm, a part of it, but there's so many people here that have been such a big integral part of the building the culture of building this team to bring it back, being college football sickos through and through that we are. So it's been so much fun just to see that. But yeah, that's kind of my story of how I got here. It's always been video games for me. It's always been sports, and I've found a way to marry those two. And thankfully through Florida State, it was able to kind of come to fruition that way.
Luckiest man in the world, like I said.
Absolutely.
So when you go into like you're doing QA testing or whatever, the beginning stuff, when you said you got involved in like game design, I mean, what does that mean? Does it mean coding? Like what exactly, and what is a game designer? Like what is your job day to day?
Yeah, so that's a really interesting question because I've been in this industry for 24 years now, and it's changed so much in the time that I've been here. So I am not a technical person. I've been here this long. I cannot write code at all. Now, there's a lot of young designers who are very skilled and are kind of dual threats in that they can code and they can design. I'm more the traditional just game designer and kind of more a producer in that regard. So in my role is really kind of helping to shape the creative of what we're going to do. So you think about something like building a dynasty mode. Well, what does that mean? Well, you need to have, conference standings. You need to have schedules. You need to have the conference, the concept of conferences altogether, and the scheduling uniqueness of college football and how the conference schedules versus non-conference schedules work, all those sort of pieces. And so my job is really to help design out how those are going to work. And you think about things like a custom conference feature, for example. You can go in and reshape the landscape of college football in this game. If you want to bring things back to maybe an older iteration where your conference mates weren't always Cal and Stanford and SMU, but if you're going to go back to an older configuration, you're able to do that. If you want to look into the future maybe and move Florida State into the Big Ten, if you want to see what that world looks like, you can do that in the game. And you've got to build all the rule set for how that works. And so that's kind of my job, is to lay out the landscape of what the game is going to be and the feature set's going to be, but also too, how do those features work, and kind of making sure we're understanding all the edge cases of everything that goes into making a game, because it's very complex. A lot of it can look very simple on the front end, but on the back end, it's like a duck, right? You look at a duck above the water, all calm and cool, but under the water, those legs are going so fast and paddling, but you don't really see that. That's kind of how game development works in a lot of ways, in that we're trying to figure out the best way to recreate this game. Recruiting, for example, there's so many different elements and aspects of recruiting that you can create. So how do we build out a roster and database of like 3,400 prospects per year that are all built out throughout the country, that are regionally correct, that 5 stars have the height and weight that you'd expect them to see, the ratings and skills they'd expect to have, but then also too, like their interest in schools. Why would a kid from Orlando be interested in the Big Three from Florida, or why would another kid from Orlando not be interested in the Big Three and want to leave the state? Building in those motivations and things like that. So all those things, everything you see in the game, there's a feature behind it, and there's work that went in behind it to try and figure out how that happens. So that's a lot of the work. It's kind of figuring out the logic of how things are going to happen in the game.
All right, so you're talking to an old dude, man. And so I played the old school Madden back in the 90s. Mm-hmm. When I was in college in the early 90s, we would be up all night playing Madden with Reggie White and Barry Sanders and whoever. In the 2000s, when I started when college NCAA got on my radar, and I'm covering Florida State and I'm hearing about it, I was a little bit almost intimidated to even try to play, because I would hear about like, oh, people are downloading rosters and they're doing this and and it seems so complicated. And then I hear the stuff you're talking about with today's game, with mm-hmm. recruiting and all the other stuff that's part of it. It's very intimidating, I think, if you're older than probably 35 years old. So but can you just sit down and just play? Can I just play Madden, or do I need to know, like, does this need to be my life's ambition that, to spend that much time with this game?
Yeah, it's really funny because a lot of us, I'm in my mid 40s myself. Gaming is intimidating at times, especially some of these games that are super complex and super in depth. So you're trying to serve multiple audiences. We're trying to serve a young generation that never really knew the old game and has very different motivations than maybe I do in my mid 40s. So there are a lot of different ways you can play this game. You can just play a normal, just play now exhibition game, pick 2 teams and go. If you're just looking for a quick experience that way. Your dynasty experience is going to be your more in-depth experience. Sure, you can spend as much time as you want to going through and scouting prospects and recruiting and getting super deep in that, but you can also just let the CPU handle that for you and just play your games if you want to go that route. Road to Glory is the single player experience, so you can create yourself and go through as if you were a player and play your 4 years. That's a little bit more of a quicker casual experience too, because you're only playing as your character. So if you're the quarterback, it's just going to super sim the defense for you, so you don't have to even watch that. You'll come back out, play the offensive snaps, and keep moving that way. So, that's one option. Ultimate Team is another area where you can get into. That's more of a card collecting mechanic, where you go in and you can kind of create a team, and you have more bite-sized elements of gameplay there where you can just play little challenges here and there. You can go play online against other folks. Same with, there's another new mode, Road to the College Football Playoff, which is really just about you getting in and playing other folks online, and you get more points, and you level up faster if you are able to play with a worse team and beat a better team. So kind of helping drive people to play with just more than just the Georgias and the Alabamas of the world, but experience the Georgia Southerns and the South Alabamas as well.
So when you're going through that process of designing the game and figuring out what all you want to be a part of it, do you guys have to kind of temper it a little bit and say, maybe we don't need to do all of this? Like, is there some give and take, or is it just, man, throw everything in it and just run wild? What way, like, are there limitations, I guess, and how you have to limit yourself a little bit?
Yeah, no, great question. This is a very unique experience for us because this was unusual, and this was a 3-year development cycle where we were able to really take time to build this thing from the ground up and build it back up. Typically we're in an iterative cycle where it's every year we're putting out a new game, and we're kind of already in that right now where it's an odd spot where we're going to launch in a week, but my head has already kind of moved on to next year and figuring out what we're going to do next year. Still while celebrating the fact that, we're at this, momentous occasion where this game is finally going to be back after all this time. But the clock never stops. So you got to keep moving forward and keep progressing on what we're going to do next year, as well as also working on what we're going to do post-launch as far as supporting this game. Because that's another piece that's changed, since I've been here, is that concept of, title updates. It used to be whatever was shipped on that disc is what you got for the year. And if we made a mistake, sorry, we'll do better next time. But you got to wait a year for that to come out. Now we're able to make multiple updates throughout the course of the year. There'll be roster updates that happen throughout the year. Features will be added in. So, to that point, to the question, we don't ever try to hold anything back. We always try to leave everything on the table, but you also do have a limit of how many people you have on the team and how much time you have to be able to put in new features. And you also want to make sure that you are doing it in a way that you're not just kind of half implementing something. You want to make sure you're doing it in a way that doesn't feel unfinished or just, unpolished or for lack of a better term, broken. It's a full-fledged game. We want to make sure that it's got everything there. So that was really important to us. And you think about this last, where we were a year ago at this time, we were talking about, actually a little over a year ago now, we had made the decision to give ourselves an extra year of development time. And that really is where we were able to get to a full-fledged, full-featured version of the game, and not just a very kind of like re-entry in that everyone's like, hey, congratulations, I'm glad you're back, but like, you're missing this, you're missing this, you're missing this. Like, are you really back yet? So we wanted to take that extra time, and credit to the company, because that just meant throwing more millions towards this thing without getting any return yet. To be able to, and I know EA has its reputation, and some of that is definitely, I'm not blind. Some of that's definitely earned, but also too, some of that, this is a good example of when this company cares about something, we can put a lot of time and effort behind it. And so you saw that with this title. We all knew how important this was to bring this back. I mean, there was an article I saw today on Forbes where there was somebody talking, Brian Mazik was the author, talking about the fact that like you're actually seeing positivity in comment sections on the internet. Where does that ever happen, right? Now, I've also been here long enough to know that is fleeting. When this game comes out, there will be things that are found that we're going to cringe at, that we're not happy about, or things that we didn't even know that get found out after they've launched. And so it's kind of we're enjoying this moment right now, but we also will come down to reality at some point, because this is just a piece of software. There are going to be problems with it, but going back to that title update piece, it's nice to be in a world where we're able to update things and not just be locked in the disk. And that also goes with working with schools on things that are coming out down the line. So uniforms and things like that, like we'll be able to do post-launch support when new uniforms come out to be able to put them into the game. So it's just an exciting time. And I love how schools have really rallied around us being back. You're seeing some schools talk about launch parties or working with us on uniforms to make sure that we know what's coming up to be able to have those moments. Stadium renovations, and we can talk about how, Doak and how that's going to look in the game. It's just interesting to see how these schools have really resonated with us being back. And it's not just a licensing agreement where we get their marks and we go make a game. No, it feels like a partnership, and I love that fact.
So on that note, so Doak Campbell Stadium is being reconstructed right now.
Yeah.
Over the course of this season. It'll be fully ready with a whole new look for 2025. Is that reflected in the game that they're in that limbo part, or is it going to look like classic Doak?
Yeah, so this was a really interesting thing that we had of knowing that we had a multi-year development cycle, knowing also that, and stadiums are our biggest asset to create and our most expensive asset to create. So we were in a situation where we're like, okay, how are we going to handle some of these schools that are, in process or in progress of development or have something that's about to start? And so we worked with every school individually. And so with Florida State and with Doak, we talked to the school and they were like, you know what, we really don't want to show the interim version. Which I totally understand.
Sure.
So what the decision was go with the original kind of older version, what was their last season, and that's what will be in the game this year.
Doak Classic. We'll go Doak Classic or New Doak.
Yeah, and the New Doak, right? And we'll be there for the next iteration of the game. So when we come out, for the next game, you'll see the fully finished version, everything updated that way. That's a nice part is we were able to get renders and everything else so that we had everything we needed to be able to create that new version and be able to have that available. So when the next game comes out, that's what you'll see. So we'll kind of bypass that interim stage. But some other schools had originally asked us to do the interim version and then had second thoughts about it, and we've moved forward and made the new version. So you're going to see some stadiums that are in progress right now. You'll see the futurized finished version, and others were like Doak. They were like, okay, let's keep us the way we are, and then we'll just jump forward to the new version. So we worked with each school to understand what they wanted, and then went that way. But that's kind of how we landed with Doak, was kind of the classic version for this first year.
So were those relationships, and the first time around, were those relationships with the school that positive in terms of like working together collaboratively, or is that more now because it's with NIL and everything else, it's more kind of above board?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think it's greater now than it ever was before, even though it wasn't bad before.
Right.
But it was more kind of a licensing agreement in the old days, where we worked with them, but there wasn't that much of an interaction of what we're doing and making sure that they were involved. We would work with, if there was something like, renovations in the past, we would ask for the updates, but it's much more of a kind of a handshake and partnership agreement now than it ever has been before, which you're seeing, right? Like Boise State yesterday, they did a uniform reveal and they used content from our game to help with that reveal. That wasn't something that really happened much in the past. So that, I think, is where I'm so excited about this future, is that, this is, a great avenue for the sport to be able to help educate and teach people what's going on. A lot of us, that are working on this game, we're well versed by now on the new 12-team playoff format and how all that's going to work. So we had to build that out and how that's going to work. And, not going to lie, was a little salty about how things ended last year, and and thinking about how that's going to be going forward for predicting logic of how the rankings are going to work going forward in this kind of new world. And so we're kind of getting to play in that a little bit and kind of understand how the rankings are going to work and working with the CFP on how that happens. But you're seeing a lot more of this interaction with schools being very interested in what we're doing and us being very interested in working with them. And also, too, you think about the transfer portal and all those pieces, and you're talking about roster movement. This game, in a way, is going to be a really good way to help you get ready for the season. That, we all know DJU is the quarterback for this year, right, but not every casual fan might know that. But they're going to play this game and be able to see, DJU and Roydell and Malik and everybody else that came in, and how they're integrating into the offense and defense and being able to play with them in the game. It just makes you a better fan. So that's another part that I'm super excited about.
So the game was, I guess, I don't know how you phrase it, dark or in limbo or hiatus or whatever, for basically a decade?
11 years. Yeah.
So, and you said you always felt like it was going to come back. Was there a point where you wondered, or how much conviction did you have that would definitely come back?
I mean, a true believer is always going to be a true believer. But yeah, moments got a little dark there for a few years. We're just like, okay, where is the light coming from at the end of this tunnel? Like, what is it going to be? We had talked about a long time ago, what does a game look like that is just generic, that has the schools, but doesn't have any players? Is there anything that is, does that satisfy just a 1-year piece? And then people are like, okay, cool. But like, why would I get this again? Really NIL was the thing that opened the door for us to be able to get back in, to get schools excited about being involved with us to come back in again. Because even in that generic world, there were some schools that were a little hesitant to get involved. And I understand that, it was a fun legal situation to be in for everybody. And so getting past that into a new world where we could have players in, that was such a big piece to unlock to having us come back. And so from that, it still also is a very unique world in college, in that it's not like the NFL or the NBA where you cut one check and you get the rights to every school, or you cut one check and get the rights to every player. There's no players association, obviously, for players currently. So it was this whole undertaking of how are we going to bring this thing back in a way that we can get everybody involved. And so you look at that, okay, let's get the schools on first. Awesome. They're in. And some were hesitant to jump in until they understood the NIL piece, which again, totally understand. And then it was, okay, how do we get the players involved? And so that was the next piece. And so kind of learning that, those inroads of everything with NIL and how that constantly is changing, and how can we fit in with that and be able to get the rights to get players involved. And so those were kind of the two biggest pieces to get things going. And once we had that, then, okay, cool, now we've got something and let's go from here. And so it was really just this foundation that we built that now we're going to build up on. And so, we went with generic coaches for this first year. And that was a conscious choice that we made, that we wanted to get the players in first before we brought in coaches. So we felt that would kind of be a poor look on our part if we did all this work and brought all these coaches in and then didn't have the players when we actually were able to for the first time. And so, that was a piece for us to do. So we kind of, everything was working in their incremental ways to be able to get this thing back. And so it was probably about, I would say, 4 to 5 years ago when it finally was like, okay, there's a real chance that this thing's coming back. Timing has to work out, and everything kind of works out in its own way for its own reason. And I know everybody else that has been as anxious as me for this return has been waiting patiently, and sometimes not as patiently, for 11 years for this thing to come back. But I think that's the testament to why we're back, is all these fans who kept the game alive, have been playing NCAA 14 every day to this, to this day. There's this college football revamp group, this modding community that has taken that old game and figured out some really crazy things that they can do to keep the game modern. And we've hired a number of those folks to come and join this team to help us build this game back. And so, it's just been, it's kind of labor of love. I think like you've got this really interesting mix on this team of vets like myself who are dyed-in-the-wool college people who, have only ever wanted to work on this game and have been waiting patiently to come back. You've got folks who worked in other areas of the industry that were just dying to be a part of this, that have come on and have started working with us. You've got guys like, I mentioned the revamp guys who were outside the industry that we brought in to help build this thing, because it's such a labor of love and such a passion for us that, it was kind of fun just bringing this team back together. We had people who had left EA shortly after college, departed, that the moment that we came back, we're like, oh, I'm back. I'm coming back. Wow. We're building this thing. Let's get the band back together. And so that's been a lot of fun too.
Yeah. And the fact that you said the schools have been so excited about it, I think they see the value. If they didn't, they wouldn't be so supportive. It felt like over those the last few years, like you'd see stuff on social media where like, it's coming back, but nobody really knew for sure. And were you guys sworn to confidentiality? Like how did you guys keep it secret before it was officially launched?
This is one of my favorite pieces of this whole thing. Favorite, and also honestly one of the more frustrating elements of creating this game and bringing it back was there was such a demand for every bit of information that we had to change up how we corresponded with schools and how we corresponded with groups because of Freedom of Information Act. And right. Guys like Matt Brown, who I actually have become pretty good friends with, and he's done a phenomenal job, used FOIAs to be able to find information about the game and post that out. And so you had all these outside sources kind of telling the story of the development of the game and things that were coming on based on the nuggets they were able to pick up and pieces here and there. Because we were very tight-lipped of what we were doing, intentionally so. But the tighter we got lipped, the more things seemed to leak out, which is really funny, because you saw this just undying, fascination with every minute detail. We would work with schools, like we would send out, hey, what song do you play, on a big third down on defense, or for a first down, or that sort of thing. Like just we know our own schools, but we don't know 133 other schools. I don't know like the back of my hand, unfortunately. So we go out and ask them to tell us, okay, what do you want to play in these situations? And you would see people like, oh my God, West Virginia told EA that they play country roads. Like, of course, everyone knows that. Like, but it became a big deal to know that. It was just really interesting how much fascination there was over every minute detail, especially for somebody who worked on the old game for as long as I did. We were putting out lists like the top 25 toughest place to play every year without anyone even raising an eyebrow.
Now it's content for every website. It's content for every website in the country now.
Yeah, and I think also too, it doesn't hurt that we're doing this in July. It's a great time for us to be able to kind of take up some of that space in the college football world. That's it's kind of like it's never dormant anymore, but it's the most dormant month probably of anything. So it's a great time for us to kind of steal some of those headlines.
Yeah, no question. And I guess I'm sure you get asked this every time you talk to anybody who knows you went to Florida State, like, just in terms of like the player ratings and that kind of stuff, like how do you be objective and how does that process work?
Yeah, I know. I mean, if you can see, there's plenty of Florida State around here. Everyone who knows me knows I'm a Florida State fan. That I do not hide that fact whatsoever. But I think there's also that, the longer you do this, the more that just kind of evens out to a degree. Like, I want to make sure that everything for Florida State is right. But I'm also, everyone knows I'm a Florida State person. If I put my thumb on the scale for them, I'll get called out quickly for that.
Right.
So you have to kind of measure your tone of how you're going to do things. So it's more about just making sure that we're right, but also too, you get to know people at these other schools. I won't stop in Alachua County for any reason, but I've gotten to know some people at Florida that I actually okay. These are great people. They're fun. Same with Miami and everywhere else. Like, we all kind of, there's a professional element that you can do where you kind of put that aside. And you do what you have to do to make the best game possible, because we truly do take the mantra that every school is someone's favorite. So these are also our partners. I don't want to do anything that's going to slight a partner, but also too, we're all college football fans. Like, we all want the best for ourselves. But yeah, no, I think that's something that, like, it's truly that professionalism of, okay, cool, I'm a Florida State fan. You're going to see that everywhere you go around me, but you also want to make sure you're doing the best you can for everybody. We're not just making a game for one school or for one fan base. So yeah, in my younger years, I probably would have given you a different answer, but maturity comes with age.
When you were playing back in the day, like, who were your favorite players when you were playing the old version, even before you started working for EA? Like, who were your go-to guys for Florida State back in the day?
Yeah, I mean, well, so this is also an interesting one of with the past history is, we didn't have the real players, in the game. So
you just had their numbers, right?
Or the numbers and kind of a representation of who those players were. But like, you think about, some of those games. So I was playing in 90, I was obviously a freshman in 97 and playing some of those super early versions of the game when it was just super pixelated. And, you were looking at it, just, you're playing and going to school at the same time as guys like Peter Warwick. Like, those are just tremendous, people to play with. Or you think about, like, I actually have it on the back of my phone here. You can kind of see it's a little washed out now, but the 0-2 cover, my all-time favorite cover. You think about that game. That was back, when there was that whole argument of Anquan Bolden was still at quarterback at the point, hadn't gotten hurt yet. So there was that question of, will it be him or Chris Ricks taking over? You had the kind of the two players you could battle out as far as a quarterback challenge there. Those were always kind of fun things for me. You think about just all the players that have come through. They were all fictitious versions of themselves. What I'm so excited about is these are new versions now of the real players. Like, that's actually Luke Kromenhoek in the game. You can play with him. You can build your dynasty with him. You can go through and play your year with DJU and then build up for Luke taking over or Brock taking over. You have all those elements. And so I think that's my favorite part is, you have the past and there were a lot of great pieces there, but you've got this future of these real players, and you've got Ultimate Team where we can get legends involved. Like, just because the real Peter Warwick wasn't in the old game doesn't mean we're not able to sign him to a Legends deal to be able to get him in the new game. So I think that's another part that you're going to see that's a lot of fun down the line is this mixture of current players, but also bring back some of these, legends into the game and being able to celebrate some of the past. I think that's one of my favorite parts too.
So if I'm playing with Florida State, right? Mm-hmm. So then I'm hearing the Warchant, I'm hearing the Chiefs, I'm seeing Osceola and Renegade. Like, what's the experience like if you're playing for Florida State?
Yeah, I think that's one thing. If you look at our presentation trailers and the presentation deep dives that we've done, that's an area, when you think about college football, it's the pageantry, right? The sights and the sounds. Like, our core is sights, count, sounds, gameplay, and dynasty. Those are our core tenets of this game. And so when you think about that, it's what's it like to go to a game at Doak, right? I have my Champions Club seats. I love to kind of look and see what things look like up there and building out that element, because that wasn't in the old version of Doak that we had in the old game. So you have Osceola and Renegade are in the game, so you're able to see them during the run out. The recreation of the marching chiefs and everything else that goes along with that game day piece. You hear the war chant blaring, the crowd, doing the actual war chant. So this was a kind of a fun story of a lot of the crowd chants. We sourced some of them from our friends at ESPN that were able to give us feeds from trucks, but there were a lot of ones that we wanted to make sure we recorded ourselves. So a bunch of us went on the rooftop and were mic'd up, and we're going through and doing all the chants for schools, just so we made sure we had those versions as well. And so we were up there on the roof just doing the war chant, and I'm helping to lead them just because it comes so natural how to do it. But I can also, too, remember, just flashing back to the early 2000s, we did the same process back in about 2002, 2003-ish. And I could always hear my own voice in the war chant sample that we had, because I kind of did it a little different. I did it the way I would think a true Seminole would do it. But my voice kind of stuck out. I could hear it myself. I can't hear it in the new version, which I'm happy about, because that means we had more people up there and we did a better job of making it sound like 80,000 plus that we're doing it. But yeah, you see all those elements in there. You see cutscenes of fans doing the chop and everything else that we really try to do to nail that authenticity. You think about, the helmets. They start fresh in a dynasty, all clean. Throughout the course of a dynasty, based on how individual players are performing, you'll see the tomahawks being added. And we work with every school to understand their fill patterns, to make sure we start with the diamond in the back and then fill up and then kind of go all around. So you see those elements coming in as well. Working with on playbooks, right? Understanding, what do schools do? What are their tendencies? Trying to build out playbooks to match them as best as we can with the plays that we have and everything else that we're able to do. So it's really trying to nail that feeling of what is it like, to be in Tallahassee on a fall Saturday and just feeling what it's like to have that crowd and everything else around you. That's one of those pieces. So yeah, all those elements are there to really try and make it feel like a true home game.
That's awesome. So how much media have you done personally? How many interviews have you done over the last few months?
I've done a few. We've actually, we've kind of been a little quiet. We let the game kind of speak for itself in a way, which is really interesting. There's going to be a lot more coming up here as we get towards launch. But yeah, it's been fun. That's one of my favorite things to do, is just talk about this game and talk about this process. There's so many unique and fun stories to be able to tell. I mean, I even think this is kind of a funny one too. Just thinking of the old NCAA 14 game. If you've ever been curious why, if you played that game, they had on the field art, it was the Seminole, Seminole head in the center, and it was kind of that shockwave look on the field. Mm. That was my fault. Sorry about that, everybody. The day before we locked the game for that year was the spring game, the 2013 spring game. And that was the one where, Jameis had his coming out party and everything was so amazing. And that was the Mo pattern for that game. I was like, well, that looks great. That's awesome. And it takes really no time to do field art changes. So I had our artists just make it really quickly. We put it in, boom, there it goes. I was like, oh, this is awesome. This will be what we do in the fall. We've already got it in the game, and we never did it again. And so we also never had a chance to go back and change that and correct that. So for 11 years now, I've had to, every time I play that game and every time I play as Florida State, I have to look and see that shockwave field and be like, oh yeah, okay, so this is why we don't just do things on our own. This is why we work with our partners better to understand what they're doing, because that would have been an easy phone call to say, hey, is this something you guys are going to do? And be told, no, that was kind of a one-time thing and we wouldn't have done it. So just weird things like that happen throughout development that are always fun to be able to kind of share those stories. But same thing with this one of bringing this game back and all the work that we did. There's just so many pieces of getting to different features and seeing things come online. And the first time we saw players, like that's still, I pinch myself every time I still see real players in the game, just knowing the history of this game and kind of the players being the reason why we weren't making this game for 11 years, that inability to be able to have them in the game. So just every time I boot up and just see those players in there, like that just, man, it just brings a smile to my face because we're back. Like this game is back. It's such an amazing thing to say.
It's got to be so awesome for those players because back in the day, like you said, when their names couldn't be used, the players that I remember, or Xavier Lee or guys like that, would complain about their ratings, or I'm Chris Davis, I'm way faster than that, or whatever it was. And now they're actually there, like they're on the screen. It's got to be, you've got to feel like Santa a little bit over the last, because you're, like you said, the demand, people have wanted this back in their lives so badly. Plus, you're bringing it back in such a huge way with the players involved. I mean, this is how cool has this been for you?
Amazing. It's really been amazing. And I think that's one part too with the player piece is, getting them into the game has been such a tremendous, just undertaking. First and foremost, just to sign up every player that we were able to get. And just, it was kind of a leap of faith of will these players sign up to be in? And then, we open up that portal, and then that first day, just seeing the flood of players signing up the moment they were able to, just made you feel good to know, okay, we're back. We're on something here. We got something good. Like, we got the schools, we got the players. Like, we got everything we need to make this thing. And so I think that's been a really fun part too, is the player ratings part. We kind of turned that into a cottage industry on the Madden side of things. They've got the Madden ratings program. They always that's one of their biggest beats. They talk about ratings. Now we're doing that in the college space, and you're doing that in a really interesting way with a lot less information, because these are a lot less, completed players that you don't have. You can go through high school, for sure. And there's a lot of different elements and a lot more now that you can learn about players than you ever could, when we were making the game before, which is great. And we work with partners like Pro Football Focus that can give us some good details to help build off of. But yeah, a lot of this is just projection and opinion we don't have the combine that we use for the NFL for Madden to know specific 40 times and know specific vertical jumps and things like that we can translate into ratings. So a lot of it more is just kind of the perception of players, and what you're able to glean off of stats and kind of the hype around players and what they do and don't do well. And so that's a big part. But also, too, I think for players, I mean, everybody feels they're a 99, right? Everyone feels they're the best player in the game. So I think that's the other fun part, too, is, we did the top 100 players today came out. You'll see more content coming out as we go. I mean, once we come to Tuesday, this next Tuesday, the 16th, and the game comes out for the early release, or the 19th for the full release, and everything's out there. I expect some players are going to be surprised at their ratings and not exactly, pleased, but they also have a chance to prove us wrong. That's another piece, is we can always make updates. So that's another nice part.
Yeah, I think I looked at the list. Was Patrick Payton pretty highly rated?
He's a beast. Patrick Payton is a beast, and I love pairing. I mean, with Marvin Jones Jr. on the other side, I love pairing those two together. Like, it's a lot of fun just to have those two pin their ears back and do after the quarterback. It just, and Az Thomas over there in the corner. Like, you've got just so many fun things that you've got with this team that you're able to do. And by the time the game has, the games are kicking off and toes to leather, and we're kicking off in Dublin, like, you've probably already won a national championship in the game. And so this team through and through, and you've gone through everything with them. So that's another part that I think is just going to be great to see is people's reaction to getting through those seasons and playing with their teams and getting those number one recruiting classes and what their own version of the future of Florida State looks like. It's just so much fun.
And you guys have already done so much testing, and you've had people check it out. So are there any nerves for you leading up to July 16th or July 19th, or do you feel you're already focused on the future?
I mean, absolutely nerves, just because it's software. It's a video game. While we've spent a lot of time working on this thing, and we've had a lot of eyes on it ourselves, the day we put this thing out there, you'll have more eyes on it than we've had the entire time building up to this. And so you're going to have, with anytime you have physics-based, gameplay, there's going to be anomalies and things that just look weird. So yeah, there's going to be those. And those also happened way back in the day. We just didn't have capture devices that were making it so easy to stream these things or post them. So I think it looks a little more outsized now, the number of, like, when you see these oddities, that makes it feel like, oh, there's all these things, but they're kind of very rare and just happen here and there, just happen to be captured. But yeah, I think that's a part that I'm most nervous about, is what haven't we seen, or it is a video game. What's going to just go weird that hasn't been working fine? And you have everybody out there that, to this point, again, there's positivity about not only EA, but on the internet, there's positivity about anything. Like, that's a wild thing to be at. We're in this kind of spot where we know it's not going to last. We're a game. It'll go back to, some people will absolutely love what we've done, and that's great. And some people will not, and that's totally understandable. We're trying to make the corrections of things that we got wrong, trying to make updates along the way. You try to satisfy as many people as you can, but you've got some that they're just going to be haters to be haters, and that's totally fine too.
Well, the cool thing is you, and I'm sure plenty of the people you work with, were in their seats. You were on your couch 20 years ago complaining about this or that. Yeah. So you know where they're coming from. And it's
absolutely,
it is the love of the game.
As much fans as we are the developers of this thing. So we recognize our faults just as much as anybody else.
Well, Ben, thanks so much for your time, and I really appreciate it. Congratulations. I know this is truly a labor of love, and you guys are obviously making a lot of people very happy. and I'm going to check it out, man. I'm going to try to put my 53-year-old fears aside, and try to jump back into EA Sports for the first time in a while. I think the last time I was playing, I don't know, maybe Bruce Smith might have been my favorite player. I'm not sure. So I'll see if I can give it a shot.
Quite a bit since then, but don't be intimidated. Jump in and play. Don't feel bad about putting it on an easier difficulty level just to get your feet wet again. That's totally fine. But yeah, jump in, enjoy it. It's a great experience. Ira, thank you so much for having me on. This has been a blast. It's one of those things that you never knew that you'd be back in this moment, but you always hoped you would. And so here we are. And so I can't wait to get this game into people's hands and to hear their reactions. And looking forward to making that future version and the next version after that, and the next version after that. Like, we're back. That's all I can say. It's so great to say. Very
cool. And Ben Haumiller is also on Twitter. Is it just your name? Is that your Twitter account?
Yep, at Ben Haumiller. Okay. And you can find me there. I'm more of a lurker than I am a poster, but I will get in there every now and then and say some things. Also too, Florida State, season ticket holder. So if you happen to see me, feel free to come by and say hello. I kind of do keep a low profile. I don't walk around advertising that I'm there, but always happy to talk to folks as well. So, and if you're in Dublin, hey, I'll be there as well. So come see me too. So that'll be fun.
We need to have a pint together in
Absolutely.
Dublin. Enjoyed it, man. Thanks so much for your time, and good luck with everything as the big day approaches.
Thank you so much.